despite the fact that this album analysis is a year and 2 weeks too late after the original release of the record, it's better now than never to actually analyze Next to None's debut studio album, A Light in the Dark, produced by none other than Mike Portnoy. In case you don't know who Mike Portnoy is, he was the founding member of Dream Theater, and he was the band's drummer up until September 8th, 2010. Ever since then, he's been quite the workaholic of a producer and general musician, producing such works as Metal Allegiance, another record I hope to analyze next, and the Winery Dogs' second studio album, Hot Streak, all of which came out the same year, last year, 2015. But we're going to focus solely on this work here. Mike Portnoy did not only produce this record, but he also produced the drummer of this record, Max Portnoy. So this band, the band lineup that recorded this record consists of the aforementioned drummer, Max Portnoy. I apologize for possibly butchering this name. Keyboardist and frontman Thomas Cucé, Ryland Holland on guitar, and Chris Rank on bass. Without further ado, let's actually dissect the tracks of this record. Starting off with The Edge of Sanity, the track starts off with, it's the second longest track, clocking in at 9 minutes, and the very first minute of the song is all you hear is just a bell tolling and rainfall, and I couldn't help but think of another debut album that does that in the same fashion with their title track and opening track of the same name of the same album, Black Sabbath. But Next to None, they mix it up a little with guest musicians, and the guest musician on this track and a later track on the record, I'm going to butcher his name unless I read it here. It is Heike von Wyk. He plays violin in the first minute, and around the minute 18-second mark, Max just does his magic, and then the rest of the band follows through. And it's not until the 3-minute mark that the vocals enter in, and here's where I have a little bit of conflict. The vocals are a mix of all sorts of vocal deliveries. We have, most of the time it's clean, and Thomas's voice reminds me that of a young, ambitious Steven Wilson. To use an example, another relevant example of this time, let's use Steven Wilson's solo studio album that also came out earlier that year, Hand Can I Erase. I see parallels with these clean vocal deliveries, but there's also screaming, which also raised a little bit of concern, because this band, they claim they're progressive metal, but it's as if they're taking like a Between the Buried and Me approach to their vocal delivery. And not only that, but there's also they emphasize in group vocals in the choruses of a number of their songs. In fact, moving on to You Are Not Me, the follow-up track, you'll also notice that just as the title of that track, You Are Not Me, you hear that phrase in both songs in the chorus. Like in The Edge of Sanity, you hear You Are Not Me exclaimed in a group vocal, while You Are Not Me is in clean vocal. The explanation behind this is probably because I didn't mention this yet, but this record is something of a partial concept album, much like the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is a partial concept album. But the band members, or at least Max and Thomas, have stated in numerous interviews that the concept behind this record starts from track 4, A Lonely Walk, all the way to the closing track, Blood on My Hands. But I'm not entirely convinced of this. Just like with all the lyrical similarities with all the songs, it just sounds like, because it just all sounds interconnected, but apparently that they've stated it's a lonely walk through blood on my hands, and what the concept is basically the songs tell the tale of a mentally ill man, or a man with these thoughts in his head of committing these atrocities, these crimes, which he eventually does, you'll see, or you'll hear. And that concept, to me, to find more like inspiration that might have been drawn to create this concept, I just can't help but think this sounds awfully familiar. Like, let's see here, Dream Theater's A Mind Beside Itself. They had that same sort of concept with a man that suffered from schizophrenia, and I'm not entirely sure if he also commits atrocities described in the songs there, but that's where when I listen to the whole concept of the record, I can't help but reminisce of this concept, and quite possibly another Dream Theater epic, the title track of 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, where the lyrics describe numerous accounts of mental illness and sort of atrocities being described there as well. But those are the two Dream Theater records that come to mind when I can't help but think of this overall concept. But anyway, moving on to track 3, Runaway. To best describe this track, basically the opening starts off with Chris just playing his bass, like the rhythm. It starts with the rhythm track. Chris is playing the bass, and then Max is doing his thing. But it's an exchange of keyboard motifs and guitar riffs done. Like, it's almost a conversation with Thomas speaking one sentence with his keyboard to Ryland, which replies with a guitar riff. So that's where that's what comes into my mind when I actually hear that opening. I thought that'd be a unique way of describing that. And so next on, we go to A Lonely Walk, which is the first ballad of the record, that has 2 famous guest musicians on it. Bumblefoot, that's his nickname. He's a guitarist from the Chinese Democracy, Axl Rose dominated Guns N' Roses lineup when Axl Rose toured for that record, in support of that record. And then Neil Morse of Spock's Beard, and Neil Morse couldn't actually be in the studio to record his part, so he actually emailed the Mellotron that he played to Mike, and he just basically, by the sound of it, it was overdubbed as a backing track in A Lonely Walk, so that's where you hear that. And then as far as Bumblefoot playing a role in the song, you can hear a guitar solo in the second half of the song. Also, the aforementioned violinist, he reprises his role playing violin in this track as well. It's a very well done ballad, by the way. And notice how I say first ballad. There's actually a later ballad I will get into. Next up, halfway through the record, and at the longest track, we have Control. This track right here, Control. This is like it. I really want to hear this band play this one live, because I feel like they have a lot of freedom to really expand this song and just jam out into it. In fact, maybe even sounds like there could be a slot in the midsection where Max can squeeze in a drum solo, but in the studio version of this song anyway, Thomas plays a keyboard solo, and I just really want to hear this one live, because I know with Control they can go out of control, haha. So And then next up we have Loss. If you're a classical music fan, you hear Thomas playing a keyboard motif, and it sounds an awful lot like the melody, the basic melody of In the Hall of the Mountain King, if you're familiar with that song. And it feels like the first 2.5 minutes of that song, of the 6-minute song, just extends on a jam based around that motif, and the vocals don't come in until halfway through the song. Next up, Social Anxiety. This one's my personal favorite because as a person with social anxiety myself, this is a song I could somewhat relate to. Just love everything about the song. The lyrics, especially since, you know, they relate to me. And then the vocal delivery of these lyrics by Thomas, like, he gives this deadpan spoken word delivery of the lyrics. Like, I don't think there's any singing in this song. It's just him, dun, 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 and he sings over it. And then next, as the penultimate track, we have Legacy, the second ballad, which really only sounds like Thomas and his piano. And it sounds like the aftermath of this, it sounds like putting the concept in perspective of this record. Like, it sounds like all the events are unfolding, and like it's the aftermath of what happened with this mentally ill man. So I just really like this. I like this ballad a lot. Like, I'm not entirely sure which ballad I like more. I think I personally like A Lonely Walk because there's so many musicians on in that one. But Legacy, that just, I feel like that gives like full foreclosure of like all the events of all the other songs to this one. And then finally we have the closing track, Blood on My Hands, which Max Portnoy has emphasized in numerous interviews that this is the heaviest track on the song, and with good reason, being the closing track. That's all I have to say about that track. And finally, my final thoughts on the record. The lyrics, like, I wasn't overall impressed with the lyrics. Like, a lot of them seem very cliche, but the lyrics of Social Anxiety, I think that makes up for that in some of the choruses, like the Edge of Sanity chorus. I particularly like that one. So lyricism is something they could work on in the future, in my opinion. But don't worry, fellas. Like, you look into Dream Theater's career. Like, when they first started out with Charlie Dominici, lyrics was something they were working on. But you know what these two debuts have in common? Alright, lyrics is something gotta work on. Determining vocals, I mean, I don't know, you can do what you want. I feel like maybe it's because they're young and like they were 17. The majority of the members of this band, when they recorded this song, they were 17. So I feel like the screams, like, for Thomas to sound more intimidating, this vocal delivery overall. So that's why there's the screaming. But if they're gonna go the progressive metal route, like Max's daddy, personally, I prefer just the clean vocals, get that Steven Wilson sound with the singing. But you guys could do what you want. I dig it for the most part. I dig all of it. And I'm a guy who kind of outgrew the whole hardcore vocal delivery with screaming. You do what you want. But what these two records they have in common is just why I can't give this record like a bad score. It's just the instrumental promises. Like, with the skill, there's like instrumental potential I see. This band is capable of great things, and this is merely just the baby step to a stepping stone into what we could see in the future. Like, let's see here. You know, where is it? Here. When Dream Theater started out, it wasn't that easy, and until James LeBry came around, second album. So again, Baby Step, and Black Sabbath. We heard the similarities with the opening track of this and this. Black Sabbath, eventually, by album number 2, we got Paranoid. So, overall, this is a solid debut. I give it 3.5 out of 5. Can't wait for number 2. This is Next to None, A Light in the Dark. Check it out.